light, blue and rich light is something that's really vital to kind of kickstarting our day. On the flip side, you have the sunset, and the spectrum is very similar. And here, there's a unique signature in that twilight that amplifies the circadian response that really kind of supports and kickstarts the nighttime component. And the idea is that we're uniquely designed to pick up these changes in what's going on, because these twilight changes only happen twice a day. It's either the beginning of the day or the end of the day. So we're actually uniquely positioned to use that as an amplifier to amplify the responses of what we see throughout. And so this is what's kind of going on outside the built environment. And now we built up these walls, and now basically we're under this light. And I know this is a little bit dreary for what it is, but under fluorescent light that has no consideration for biology whatsoever. So this is kind of high level what's going on. And now I'm going to kind of jump into circadian rhythms specifically to help you understand how this impacts your overall health and well-being. So circadian rhythms, it is a real thing. In 2017, the Nobel Prize was awarded to the physiologist who discovered the mechanisms of circadian rhythms. We know that circadian rhythms is a pervasive part of all biology. So everything outside these walls operate in accordance to a rhythm. Every living creature, from plants to animals to humans and insects, operate according to a circadian rhythm. Inside of us, there is every cell in our body has its own clock. A study in 2014 showed that 43% of our genetic expression is circadian, which means that we're doing the same thing at the same time every single day. And if you think about that, we're very complicated creatures. And in order to do things efficiently, we have to do things in a certain order to make the most efficient use of all the resources that we have. So if we think about, how, our body produces hormones, it's going to produce a hormone at a time that we're most likely going to use that hormone. Our metabolism is going to amplify it up in anticipation of food. In fact, there's a whole system of things that are operating at very different time or very different efficiencies at different times of the day. And even so much that there's this whole emerging field called why am I blanking on the term? It's the measure of not just what medicine to take, but when to take that medicine, because our body's going to utilize that medicine differently at different times of the day. And so when we look at this, we basically have in our eyes, and this is light's input into this, is that in our eyes, there's a newly discovered receptor that drives all these daytime responses, our circadian rhythms, our mood, our alertness, our sleepiness, learning, and physiologically our hormone secretions. And it's not just all through the circadian rhythm pathways, but there are direct pathways to different regions of the brain that drive these daytime effects. And so what this does is it demonstrates an evolutionary relationship that we have with the sun, which has been broken by modern society. And so the problem in a nutshell is basically this. Under natural light dark cycles, we go to bed a few hours after the sun's gone down, and then we wake up right about when the sun comes up. But when we're in the built environment, and I'm not sure if this is as easy to say, but the days are not as bright and the nights are brighter because we have electric lighting. So basically what we have is days that are not as bright and nights that are too bright to be considered nighttime. And what this leads to is actually a circadian drift. And the most common drift is a tendency towards night owlism. So now we want to go to bed in the middle of the night, wake up well after the sun has come up. And I'm going to talk to you about why that's important in a minute, but the whole point is to get closer to brighter days and darker nights into the built environment. And that's what we're trying to do. And so that's the goal of what circadian lighting is all about. So in order to get to the next step of understanding what the problem is with kind of this night owlism, you have to understand how sleep works. And so the way that sleep works is a two-process model. The first process is this homeostatic sleep pressure. Every hour that we're awake, this pressure builds and builds, denoted by longer arrows. Then we have an opportunity to sleep, and the sleep pressure dissipates. We wake up again, and it starts building up again. And this is all driven by your sleep timing and duration. How long you sleep and when you sleep dictates how much sleep pressure you have at this given moment. And what keeps us from falling on our face at this time when the sleep pressure is high is the second process, which is our circadian drive. And these are these upward arrows. These are kind of our alerting arrows that combat that downward sleep pressure. And so I know I just talked about resource efficiency, and you would think that we would have, for every downward arrow of sleep pressure, we'd have an equal and upward arrow of the circadian alertness. And then we'd be rock stars all day long, and then we would just crash out and sleep. But unfortunately, that's not the case. But within this, so the circadian drive has a unique profile that's different than the sleep drive. But within that, there are things that we could probably identify with. And the first one is this inflection point, which is called the afternoon lull. This is the thing that 5-hour energy like totally capitalizes. It's this groggy feeling that we have after lunch. You know, what you eat could exacerbate it, but it's absolutely a circadian process that happens every single day. And after this afternoon lull starts this uptick of energy. And this is probably the coolest thing about circadian biology that no one really ever talks about. This is known as the wake maintenance zone. And what this is actually an evolutionary process that we've inherited from our ancestors for survival. And so if you think about it, before electric lighting, the onset of darkness was a really scary time for us. This was the time where we went from being predator to being prey. And so it was really important at the end of the day to get our stuff done, go find safety, and survive the night to make it to the next day. And so what we understand is that actually inside of every one of us, we have this burst of energy to do just that. And it's physiological energy, but it's also neurobiological energy. We're actually smarter, more creative at this time, all designed to get our stuff done, go find safety, survive the night to make it to the next day. And so after that's subsided, then comes something called the opening of the sleep gate. And so this is probably something you may have heard of. This is when a hormone melatonin is secreted. And so when this happens, our heart rate slows down, our muscles start relaxing, our immune system boosts up, our metabolism shuts off, trying to hold all the resources that it has for the sleep period. And so these alerting signals go down, 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 allowing us to sleep for this amount of time. And they pick up again with something called our cortisol awakening response. And so this is for those of you who wake up at the same day without an alarm clock. That's designed to get you out of this sleep phase. And so you may wake up at 6 a.m. when you go to bed at 10 p.m. And you may also, sometimes go to bed at 1 a.m., but you still wake up at 6 a.m. So sometimes it's really convenient. Sometimes it's really annoying, but it's a circadian process, and it's all kind of evolutionary based. And so this process, the circadian drive, is fundamentally different than the sleep pressure in that it's driven by light timing, not color or duration, the timing of light. So if we were in a dark cave for 7 days, this process would continue to persist over and over again, but it would be like space station. I'd be on a 24.2 hour cycle. Mark would be on a 24.3 hour cycle. James would be on a 24.1 hour cycle. So we wouldn't have anything to synchronize to. So we'd start drifting and free running on our own rhythm. And so this is kind of how it works in the ideal scenario. This is how sleep and wake works for the ideal person. And so what we're starting to understand now is that's none of us. We all have these differences that we call chronotype differences. So chronotype is a chrono, like chronology, which is time, and type is type, our time type differences. And so what this is our self-selected preference for bedtime and wake time. And to give you a social example of what this looks like, I pull from a show called Modern Family. I don't know if you guys have Modern Family on your side of the world, yep. But it's a really popular show here. So in this particular episode of Modern Family, Mitch and Cam were just tired of the restaurant options available to them. And so they're really excited that this hot new restaurant was going to open up just down the street from them. But unfortunately, everyone is excited about this hot new restaurant opening up down the street. And so getting a reservation was a little bit of a challenge for them. So Mitch is calling them up for a dinner reservation. And Cam's, right there next to him. And so Mitch calls him and says, oh, well, they could take us at 5:15 for dinner. Think about 5:15 and who's eating dinner at that time. And Cam says, well, what are we, 80? Who's eating dinner at 5:15? And then he says, well, or they could take us at 10:45. Think about 10:45 and who's eating dinner at that time. And so Cam says, well, what are we, 20? Who eats dinner at 10:45? And so this, to me, at least, is social validation that age could predict what our preferences are. But in fact, what we understand right now is that age and sex can predict what our preferences are. And so what this is based on data over 250,000 data points that predicts what our preferences are for men in the solid line and women in the dashed line as we age. Where high on this y-axis is means you're more likely to be a night owl or evening preferring person, and low on this y-axis means you're more likely to be an early bird or a morning type person. And so what we understand is that once we hit puberty, there's this sharp tendency to be more and more of a night owl, with men exhibiting stronger tendencies than women, both peaking around late teens, early 20s. And then we become earlier and earlier preferring men and women at different rates until about age 60, when men and women finally agree on what the right time of day is. And so this is what our internal clock is telling us. And a lot of times our social requirements don't agree with what these internal preferences are. And so this leads to something called social jet lag. And social jet lag is very much like regular jet lag. If I were to fly to you guys, I'm in California, it'd take me a few days to acclimate to New Zealand time. And then I'd get there and I'd be acclimated, and then I got to fly back. And so it'd take a few days to get back on California time. And so this is like, I'll do it for you guys. You're on New Zealand time and work is on California time, and you really never get in line with that time zone. And so the way that this is quantified is if you sleep and wake up differently on days that you have something to do the next day, like work, versus days that you don't have something to do. That is the definition of social jet lag. That basically says when you want to sleep and wake up and when you have to sleep and wake up are different. That is the definition. And so if we revisit the model I shared with you before, what happens here is in the night owls, the circadian drive gets shifted later, and that really cool evolutionary process encroaches the time that you should go to sleep, the time you totally know that you have to sleep, but you're wide awake and it's just really frustrating. Now, biologically speaking, what you should do is you should sleep in and recover and make up for that time. But society tells you that you need to wake at a very specific time, meetings, school, whatever. Keeping up with the Joneses, just being a productive member of society. And so society tells you to wake up at a specific time. And what time is this? This is the time that you literally hate life. This is the time that you're doing nothing productive, nothing useful, but you got to get up anyways. So the common strategy here is to, reach for coffee, Red Bulls, sugary, anything to get you going, suck it up during the week, and on the weekend, sleep in and recover from all the sleep that you lost throughout the week. So you have a big variance in your sleep timing from your work days to your weekends. And so this has been shown to be a big problem, specifically in adolescents. They showed a study in 2014 showed higher variance in sleep timing, which is basically this strategy, is the best predictor of poor academic performance. Moreover, we talked about light being the answer. So what you want to do to bring this back is brighter days, darker nights. And so a group did this and brought in kind of just the brighter morning to try to pull them in and force them into a more normal situation. Well, they showed that morning light on night owls actually, not only did it make them less of night owls, it also reduced their ADHD symptoms. And so now what we're starting to understand is some of these behavioral outcomes that are more prevalent in today's society are downstream consequences of circadian disruption. Moreover, I kind of mentioned or hinted at this before. If you're putting, something in your system, food to try to get you going, your metabolism isn't really ready for this. And so a study looked at this specifically and showed that eating closer to circadian night is associated with significant weight gain, that our bodies just aren't ready for getting, calories into our system at this time. On the flip side, you have your early birds. It's not just the night owls that have problems. On the flip, oops, wrong button. So this gets shifted earlier, and that cortisol awakening response dictates when these people wake up. And so they might wake up at, say, 4 a.m. and they know they're going to be tired at 9 a.m. But right now, when they could totally sleep in, the house is quiet, they just can't do it because that cortisol is going and they just can't sleep in past it. And so what they should do is go to bed earlier to compensate for it. But a lot of times they want to do social things, hang out with friends and family, watch their favorite TV shows, so on and so forth. And so what is most a common strategy, at least for those who can afford it, is this afternoon lull looks more and more like a late morning nap. Not to say that there's anything wrong with a nap, but this is a common strategy, especially amongst the elderly. And when that nap becomes an everyday strategy, and moreover, when that nap gets bigger and bigger, but more than that is when that nighttime sleep gets smaller and smaller, this leads to something called sleep fragmentation. And sleep fragmentation has been shown to increase the risk of Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline. And so the reason why this happens is because when we sleep, we have a very specific architecture where we repair our body first and then our mind second. And so when you have two smaller bouts of sleep, you have the opportunity to repair your body, and not so much opportunity to repair your mind. But wait, there's more. This is a report that came out from the Salk Institute that showed all the consequences of circadian disruption as we age. With higher on this y-axis means it's more a severe disease, but as we age along the x-axis. So circadian disruption amongst babies and children could look like irritability, compromised learning, excessive daytime sleepiness. It could culminate up to things like ADHD, which I kind of mentioned before, autism spectrum disorder, bipolar disorder, certain types of diseases, diabetes, which makes sense if our body can't process things right, culminating in things like certain types of cancers, Alzheimer's disease, and so on and so forth. And so I'm not here saying that lighting is going to cure all these things, but I am here to tell you that we're doing ourselves no favors with the lighting environment that we're currently providing. And in fact, a study in 2016, said that 87% of non-shift workers have some form of social jet lag. Another said a different way, 87% of people have the opportunity to benefit from circadian lighting, from taking the strategies of brighter days and darker nights into the built environment. So, and actually, I usually show of hands who says they have social jet lag based on what I've described here. And I won't be able to see anyone's hands, but James could report back if there's a lot of people raising their hands. But why? Why do we all have social jet lag? Well, so this is daylight. This is the spectrum that creates daylight. And this is a newly discovered photoreceptor. It's a sky blue photoreceptor, like I mentioned before. And this is typical LED technology, and it always has a trough in the sky blue region. So really what's going on is we're inside all the time. And now we understand we're really inside under really poor lighting. And even if the lighting looks fantastic and it's new, hot and trendy, all this stuff, and it looks bright, if it's standard LED, it's probably putting out the wrong spectrum of light, and it's not giving you that daytime signal you need to perform on a day-to-day basis. Now, some people have probably heard of circadian lighting and have heard of it as color tuning. So I want to quickly point on how color tuning addresses this. Hopefully everyone here is familiar with what color temperatures are, but here, is 1000 Kelvin is very yellow, 10,000 Kelvin is very blue. The majority of stuff that we're looking at here are between 3000 and 5000 Kelvin. So this is how spectrum looks a different way to our eyes in a spectral way. So this purple is our blue perception, green is our green perception, red is our red perception. This is our blue, green, and red cones. And melanopsin fits like perfectly next to all of those. And so when you get this 6,000 Kelvin LED, it pinpoints that blue perception perfectly. So it visually feels very blue. And then it has a trough here in the melanopic region. They apply a phosphor to get the lumens out of it. And so when you take that 6,000 Kelvin and go to say 5,000 Kelvin, what they do is they drop the blue here, but the trough is pretty much exactly the same, just a different phosphorus overlaid on top. When we go to say 4,000 Kelvin, it looks like this. They drop this blue here. The trough is similar. This one's even deeper with a different phosphor. 3,500 Kelvin, they drop that blue here, a similar trough and just a different spectrum. And so when you do color tuning and so on and so forth, but when you do color tuning, you're basically modulating how much on and off these different channels are. And so you're playing with this and this, but if you're trying to do this for circadian physiology, you're kind of missing the point of what you need to do. And so this is why it's important to kind of spectrally optimize to have something that minimizes this blue perception and reappropriates that energy in the melanopic region. And when you do that, you could have, the circadian benefits you need in color temperatures that are most commonly used. 3.5 K, I think this is what James says to me. 4,000 Kelvin, 3,500 Kelvin, 3,000 Kelvin, those are common color temperatures. And so you could spectrally optimize to bring those benefits into the built environment. Now, but of course, it's more than just blue light. Blue light is one very important piece of the puzzle. But when we start looking at, I mentioned this in the very beginning, when we start looking at the spectral components of daylight, we have the violet that drives our end of day Q, like I mentioned with the twilight signature. This royal blue region is more associated with glare and macular degeneration. The sky blue region is the circadian response, the daytime vigilance, those daytime effects. This green is where visual efficiency is. This is why all the energy is usually put in this region. That's where the lumens come from. And this red is important for medical diagnosis, healing, and energy. So when we overlay, when we overlay a biologically optimized spectrum, it's really going to want to put the majority of the energy in the circadian response region and the medical diagnosis, healing, and energy region. And, visual efficiency is great, but I think that LEDs have gotten so energy efficient that maybe we could start focusing on kind of other things that might be more important than just, lumens per watt. And so when we look at adding in this region and specifically 660 nanometers, this is important for getting high R9s, high color rendering, and high cyanosis observation index. And so cyanosis, I think that most people here kind of know, but what happens is in the red region, the far reds really penetrate the skin much deeper and they reflect off of what's going on inside. And so cyanosis is a bluish coloration of the skin. It's not blue at all. It's just an absence of red that causes this. So what this is cyanosis, and it's kind of helps you identify some things that are possibly going wrong. Things like sepsis, pneumonia, bronchiolitis, pulmonary hypertension, and really what it is poor circulation. You're not getting oxygen. And so it's most likely to show itself in the extremities. It's just showing that there's something important wrong with your circulation system. And 660 nanometers is the key to discerning these differences. When you go to a doctor and they have the pulse oximeter, they're actually just pulsing 660 nanometer light and measuring the reflectance coming off of that because it is a critical piece of it. So a good medical evaluation light should include a good cyanosis observation index. It works negative to what you expect. High color rendering is up to 100. In cyanosis observation index, it is the opposite. So closer to 0 is better. But the way this is calculated, it's basically fully oxygenated blood compared to cyanosed blood. And what they discovered is that 660 nanometers is where these are most different from one another. And this is where you could kind of visually see what's going on. This is why the pulse oximeters use this wavelength specifically. And it's also really important for good definition of veins. Our veins are basically different levels of blood oxygenation levels. So delineating veins is also really important. And so why I put this graph up here is if we focus too much on the blue, and especially if we're talking about cold white light, these always have this drop off in the red region because there's no visual efficiency there. So it's just missing in that far red region that's important. So cold white light always misses in the far red region. And of course, there's more to it than just spectrum. There's more to the holistic approach. What we understand is directionality is important from a circadian aspect. So different studies have looked at this. Light coming from above the horizon plane is best. Light coming from below actually has negligible impact. And what's interesting is the light coming from the side is just as good as light coming from dead on. And so this is important because lighting design practices always focus on what's going on in the task plane, that horizontal luminance. This is like hardly a consideration whatsoever. But when you think about this from a circadian biology standpoint, it makes a ton of sense because what we understand is we have a sky blue photoreceptor that's looking for this daytime signal. And where is that daytime blue sky signal coming from? Well, it's coming from the blue sky above the horizon in all directions. And so, when we think about nighttime scenes, we could think about fire and in terms of color, but also we got to think about, we're designed to, sleep next to a fire, and that fire is absent of blue, but it's also coming from a very different region than where that blue sky is coming from and where these photoreceptors are looking for that information to come from. So when we think about it and try to put it all together, during the daytime, light your sky, high vertical lux, colder color CCTs, or anything that is as cold as possible, optimize spectral power distribution. And then at night, you could light your fire. And I'm going to show you if you think about this. So imagine this is your horizon plane. This is your sky, and this is your fire. Think about how to darken the stuff above the horizon plane at night and then brighten it back up during the daytime. So this could be a combination. I'll show you in a minute. This kind of gets to a conclusion a little bit before, putting the cart a little bit before the horse. But I'll talk about how color and spectrum kind of come together. But the point is colder white light, or as cold as possible, and that may be 35 or 4,000 Kelvin. Optimize spectrum during the daytime, try to focus on those vertical surfaces. At night, try to reduce the color temperature as much as possible. Warmer CCT and maybe a normal spectral power distribution. You're thinking about nurses' stations, corridors, think about the same thing, the horizon plane, sky, fire, and then during the daytime, try to darken that upward portion. Pathway lighting and stuff like that is critical. So, don't make it too dark, but think about it in layers of light. All right. So when you think about designing, we've looked at this in a number of ways, but we actually try to come up with a way for you guys to remember it. So we say, what are your vitals? And so vitals is an acronym that stands for vertical, because it's vertical light at the eye. Intensity, so think about output, the brighter days, darker nights. Timing, providing consistent cues every single day. It's the timing of light that's important. Appearance, so color is important. If it's colder, it's going to have the most opportunity for a blue sky response, a melanopic response. And the warmer it is, the more likely it's going to have more of a nighttime response. Location, where those lights are, think about the layers of light, and then spectrum. The spectral makeup of the light is really kind of a big driver. And I'll jump into the appearance and spectrum in just a minute. So Erica Voss and I wrote this paper earlier this year. And we kind of looked at some of these design criteria, and James could get you that paper. So we looked at vertical light as it related to room cavity ratios. So room cavity ratio, if you're not familiar, is basically how much wall space there is compared to floor space. And what this is how much opportunity, we're thinking about how much opportunity the light has to bounce off a wall compared to bouncing off the floor. And so open plan office has a room cavity ratio of 1. So it's a very large floor to wall ratio, but a private office, which is smaller, is going to have a room cavity ratio of about 5. So we looked at all the different light sources, and what we find is that no matter what, if it's an open plan office or open plan space, you're going to get about 1 vertical lumen or lux for every 2 that you get here. As you get to more of a private office, it's starting to get to a 1-to-1 ratio. So what you're getting at is basically this idea that the walls and the geometry of the space could help put more light kind of above that horizon plane in the vertical plane here. And then wall reflectivity is important as well. This is one that compared 90% wall reflectivity, which is pretty bright. Compared to 50% wall reflectivity, which is about standard. And the benefit is really minimal if you have an open floor plan. But as you get to private offices, that gets more bounces off those walls, you're going to get a lot more benefit from those highly reflective walls. So it's a combination of the geometry and the design, the wall reflectances that could really kind of boost those numbers. All right, so this is what I was talking about. So we did this analysis in here about spectrum and color. And so what this shows is the benefit. So there is some benefit to go into colder color temperatures, which shown here in the black line, that's a standard LED. If you boost up for spectral optimization, keeping CRI at 80 plus, you get this kind of step change where these 2 lines are parallel. So CCTs here and the melanopic daylight efficiency ratio is on the y-axis. So you see is almost like the same effect of color in both lines, but then you get this giant boost from going to spectral optimization. Sorry, my magic mouse is moving it. So you kind of see the effect that you want to have. Spectral optimization is like the key, the primary effect, and then you'll have a secondary effect by going to colder color temperatures, say 4K, 35K. And then at night, this is a spectral optimization for nighttime, and what you could see is that LEDs do a pretty good job at standard LEDs do a pretty good job. There's not much benefit to be had at some color temperatures, and some color temperatures, the benefit is minimal. So again, the recommendation coming from this is that spectrum has a benefit for daytime. It's much more significant than it does for nighttime. Color temperature has, a minor impact. So really the concept is during the daytime, as cold as acceptable with optimized spectrum, and at nighttime, as warm as acceptable with the standard spectrum is ideal. Controls, I think it's really important when we talk about intensity, timing, and spectrum. I think that all these things should be tied together. So spectrum, color, and intensity should be combined to make brighter days and darker nights. So the idea is that high up on a dial, any dimming dial, this isn't, this idea is based on biodimming via DALI, whereas your high intensity, it basically it has the heightened daytime component, sky blue component. As you dim it down, it drops to a standard LED, and then intensity follows. So it's almost like a dim to warm, but the idea is as you pull it out, it basically goes from daytime to nighttime with a single dial. I think this is really important as it gets beyond the educated engineers and designers into the operation or the operators. It has to be intuitive or they don't know which dials to pull. So it has to be a single up and down, day versus night, and that's really easy. Another thing that I think is important is supplemental lighting. So a lot of times it's just so hard to get the light that you need, the vertical light that you need. in the location that you want with the energy efficiency that you need. So supplemental lighting is a great way to get the brighter day component. Can be available from a plug-in desktop product. This particular one is a product that BIOS makes called Skyview, but it's designed to kind of have that highly vertical surface and provide specifically 200 EML at 3 feet distance. So what's the criteria? So if you're trying to do good, 150 equivalent melanopic lux should be your target. If you want to go better, that's 200 equivalent melanopic lux. And if you want to do the best, that's going to be 275. What most people are getting in spaces are somewhere between 75 and 100. So we're really kind of underlighting the space. But what we've seen is just simply upgrading to LED technology using spectrally optimized solutions will get you to that good level, about 150 EML. To get to that better region, you need to kind of either have higher lumen density or higher fixture density, or maybe more luminous pendants or something that's going to get more vertical light in the space. And then to get to 275, you're going to have some form of supplemental lighting that's putting more light kind of in the vertical direction. All right, so now to an application of what you might want to do with this information. Scheduling light and scenes for different spaces. So I broke it into, I know that there are specific types of rooms, but I broke it into long stay patient rooms, short stay patient rooms, nurses stations, corridors, and kind of back of house. So sorry, I think that slide was superfluous. So long patient stays. So what we understand is more daytime light has been associated with higher pain tolerance, less fatigue, better sleep, and overall patient experience. This was results of a study from Cleveland Clinic. And so the idea is what you should do, daylight or brighter day design technique should be applied with a solar schedule. Nighttime strategy should apply to brighter days, darker nights, but on a solar schedule. Basically, we're going to design for the patient. Short patient stays, if they're going to be in, I kind of draw the line at, if it's under 2 days, they're not in there long enough for circadian lighting to really be much of a benefit. So really, you should be looking at the worker who's going to be in those spaces. And to do this, what you should be doing there is kind of lengthening the day. So you want to put everyone on a summer solstice day. So people who are on the evening shift are going to kind of gravitate. So if you get early morning light, that makes you more of a morning person. If you get late evening bright light, that's going to make you more of a night owl. And what we understand is that those shift workers are basically going to perform better. The early birds are going to perform better on the graveyard shift. The night owls are going to perform better on the evening shift or the swing shift. And so by just doing those small things, lengthening the day, you could kind of do something useful for every shift. Nurses stations. So this is an interesting space. So, lengthening the day for the shift worker has been shown to have a meaningful impact, but we got to be careful not to interrupt the patient's circadian rhythms. My recommendation here is brighter days, darker nights align with the solar schedule, and then implement supplemental lighting to be more specific and more localized to the nurses when they get there. Corridors is kind of the connection point between the patient where the patients are and where the nurses are. And so really, again, to the solar cycle makes the most sense while still maintaining code compliance is the criteria. So brighter days, darker nights, but the darker nights shouldn't be so dark that it falls below the code. So that's where you could use, again, the combination of color and spectrum to kind of play that line. And then back of house, this is generally located in the core of the building with shift working occupants. And the best approach, brighter day, darker night technique for a much longer day. Shoot for an 18-hour day, 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. And sometimes what we've learned is that some people respond better to light, or let me say this differently, that they really need it. So it would be useful to have supplemental lighting available upon request for the staff that want more of this alert learning factors. This is some of the things that we've learned just over the course of working with different hospitals and the behavioral component of going from just a design to actually integrating with the operators. I think with that, I have finished. And we'll open it up for question. And I think I've got 2 minutes to spare. So hopefully they're
well done there, Robert. That was it was an awesome presentation, and I've seen you present a number of times. The first time I've seen it on Zoom, but yeah, that was very good. Thank you. Before we kick into the Q&A, we do have a couple of questions there. There's a couple that have been sent to me directly as well. So we'll try and get through those in a few minutes. We might just go 5 minutes over or so. But an actual poll is going to appear on your screen. Poll is optional and it's 100% anonymous, so anybody can answer that poll. So just to kick off the questions, I'm just going to kick off with one that was sent to me directly, which was, how does the Southern European siesta habit, so I guess think about the Spanish people here, affect their circadian rhythm, as it seems to conflict with that wake maintenance zone? And this might be related to you talking about a nap, but yeah.
Yep. So the idea is that what's the health consequences of I'll just say Spaniards who take a nap or have a siesta time. And actually, from talking to, I've asked the same question. So I don't have a full answer, but what I've been told is that they don't actually take a nap. They kind of chill out, but they don't actually go to sleep. So it's not really a nap time. It's a time that they have more of a social, relaxing time. And then what's interesting is that they use that kind of lull, which is interesting because they almost recognize that there is that lull there and that they're more efficient at the times that bound it. And so I think it's actually a really interesting strategy. Not saying that everyone should employ it, but what I've kind of learned is that they really don't sleep during this time. They just kind of chill out.
Cool. Well, that's interesting. So I have another question here, which is from Ralph. I've seen people using arbitrary vertical lux values for LED screens to help reach effective vertical EML figures. I mean, we sit in front of these screens, in our offices and often at home as well. But I guess what he's getting at, there's a lot of variation could be in that, or there's all sorts of things. What do you think of that strategy?
Yeah, that's so there's two things. One, I think that a standard screen could get you, what we've measured is about 30 to 50 EML. But that is if it's a white screen and you're actually doing nothing on it except illuminating yourself. The second you put anything on it, and even if it's a blue screen, it's really not giving you that. It's really dropping the EML levels off of it. Mm-hmm. So the screens are interesting, but the screens, I want to make a point that they're actually worse, than what I showed you from a spectrum standpoint. That's even a deeper trough because they have these pixels, which are just filters that make the blue pixels blue. They kind of sharpen it off, and then the green, they cut it off as well. So that little dip that I showed you guys before, it's even wider in LCD screens. So you're really missing the point of anything here from a spectrum standpoint.
Okay. It's really interesting. It's something that we've discussed a number of times. So, to hear that, I think that is really interesting because the screens can be so variable with what we display on them. Mm-hmm. So, from Maria, do you reckon that the sleep app from the Apple Watch can help monitor our sleep cycle and identify some problems?
Yes, I do think so. I do think that Apple needs to do a little bit better to actually correlate it to light exposure. because you have to understand if it's a light exposure issue or if it's something else in your behavior issue. But all, I wouldn't say all, but like I would say, 40-50% of all the circadian disruption studies use a watch that's very similar to the Apple Watch. They're called actigraphs, but they do take light and motion together and correlate the two. But that's how a lot of circadian disruptions are identified.
Okay.
So yeah, Apple could definitely do some really useful things, especially now they have such a strong install base.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine if they started collecting data on people's exposure to light every day.
Yep.
Another question here from Matt. Robert, should considering biological light during the lighting design in the built environment be part of providing a health or safety work environment, and should it be the default?
Well, yes, I'm on the well building advisory for a reason. I think that the data's here. I know that some people are taking it very seriously. I do some work with the Department of Energy here, which is really encouraging to think that an entity that's focused on energy is starting to understand that energy is not the most important thing. Human biological benefit is the most important thing. And so it's really encouraging to hear somebody who historically is focused on energy efficiency thinking about how to use more energy for these reasons. So I think it absolutely has to be the default. We have to figure out how to get there.
Yeah. From Luke, is the EML of say 200 factored into the well standard for an additional watts per square meter as an adjustment factor? Now, this may relate to the fact that in Australia they have this restrictive standard of J6, which is restricting the number of watts per square meter you have for lighting. So it's saying, I think what Luke's getting at here is that because this is, and I've argued this as well, is that because this is not actually visual light, providing another benefit to humans, is there a way that there can be an adjustment factor for EML?
This is a great question, and so I'm also on the California Energy Alliance for this very reason. Because a very strict energy code is Title 24 here in California. And but it comes from that level. The well building is, an input, but those are the people that have to start taking this seriously, and the data needs to start coming out. So it's not currently, but it absolutely should be. If you could get me in front of the right people in New Zealand, I will go to bat for everyone here to try to convince who I could convince with the data that we have.
Cool. So last question, I think, because we run a little bit over time, but is from Ian over at Altitude in Australia. Oh, we've got a long one just popped out of the long questions. There we go. Is there research on how long it takes for good work to be ruined? In other words, if you've got great lighting in your office, you may be delivering 275 EML to people throughout the day, and they go into public transport going home, and the lighting is either too bright or too dark. How much saturation needs to occur before you really sort of can cause issues with a short burst of bad light?
Yeah, so a short burst of bad light, this is going to be a long answer. A short burst of bad light is really only useful. It could shift people over. It could do some things that are detrimental to health, only when it's like followed up by like darkness. So the daytime lighting is really kind of the thing, like the anchor that you will. So a short burst of light is, like I think about a boat, and that all that daytime light is your anchor, and the more it is, the stronger that anchor is, and that's going to prevent you from swaying from side to side from little things that are trying to push that boat one way or the other. So it really depends on how long you're getting it for, and I would probably strongly say that if you're getting, things from transportation, from the subways, or you guys don't have subways, do you?
We do in Australia more than New Zealand, but they're building one in Auckland right now. So
yeah. So So things that you're getting in those transportation, if it's just a short period of time, it really is it's just kind of noise, and the signal is your daylight. So it is about brighter days and darker nights, but the brighter the day you have, it's always relative to one another. So the better you go on one side, the less effect that nighttime lighting is.
Yeah, that was what my understanding was too, that the more that you can give people at the right time of day, less impact some poor decision to affect you later on in the evening will have.
That's right. That's right.
So hence why reaching for that 275 ml as a goal, I mean, so that's often hard to achieve, is something that then means that the decisions that people make after work or whatever may not impact them quite as much. So, hey, look, we're nearly we're 10 minutes over there, so I think we'd probably better wrap it up there. But I just wanted to thank you very much, Robert, for joining us here today, and I want to thank everybody for joining in and taking the time. I know that your time is really precious, so yeah, we really do appreciate it. If you guys want a little bit more information specifically related to healthcare, we've actually just published a little PDF that's available on our website. I've got a nice little hard copy there. So you can download that. There's a little bit of information there that's related specifically to the healthcare, with some of the information from that Robert's talked about today. Thank you to Praneel for organising the event today, and to our sales team and everybody from the Energy Light team who supported this, and most of all to thank you to the support of our customers for taking the time and having a listen. And yeah, we're here to help you guys and partner with you on this journey into our biological lighting future. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you may be.